Dr. Tim Teel, and welcome to the Unlock a Life You Love podcast. I am Dr. Tim Teel. I am the Doc of Unlock, and I'd like to welcome you back to another segment of the Unlock a Life You Love podcast. If you've been listening over the last couple of episodes, then you'll know that we're kind of on a weird path here, exploring some alternative explanations for who we are, how these bodies work, and how we can use that understanding to help us unlock a life that we love. A couple of podcasts ago, I talked about the possibility of how other pieces of information may actually be stored in our DNA profile, our DNA genome. DNA is probably, and I don't think it's probably, it is the most powerful biochemical information storage system in the known universe, far more powerful than even the most up to date computer chips that we have. There's an entire copy of you from head to toe, in every single one of 35 trillion cells, give or take about 5 or 10 trillion. There's an entire copy of you from head to toe, repeated 35 trillion times and stored in every single one of your cells in your body. And that only accounts for 3% of the DNA that you have in every single one of your cells. And yet we've been told from time immemorial, since 1956, when we understood that that DNA was real, and that it was in every single living being out there, that 97% of DNA is junk, because we only understand what 3% of it does. Well, with all due respect to all of the academics out there in the world, that idea has just never rung true. It has always clanged in my head, mostly because I'm a church kid, and I absolutely believe that that this world was created and created intelligently with a design. This entire symphony of life was not created without a conductor, in my opinion. No, not so humbly. But no, but the fact that 97% of the most powerful biochemical information storage system in the known universe was created to be junk just never made a lick of sense. Well, over the past 5 or 6 years, I've kind of taken time to deprogram myself from that cult level thinking that 97% of DNA is junk, and said, "What else do you reckon is in there?" And in the process of considering these things, I actually came across the research of a young lady by the name of Rachel Yehuda. She's a psychiatrist in Canada, and they noted that the children of Holocaust survivors back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, were seeking out psychiatry services for anxiety and depression at 300% the rate of the rest of the population. 300%. That's not 3% more. That's not 30% more. That's 3x, three times the rate of the rest of the population in Canada, where she works. And even though when they talk to these people, they didn't have any significantly higher rates of early childhood trauma, which we know is a big problem for folks with psychiatric issues. But these people didn't have that. They didn't demonstrate any significantly higher levels of early childhood trauma. What they had in common was their parents were Holocaust survivors. Okay, so these folks had survived the camps. They came across the pond and married, had children, and those children grew up having problems with anxiety and depression at 3 times the rate of the rest of the population. So this researcher had the ingenious idea of pulling DNA samples on both the parents and their children, and what she found was, in that junk DNA, long strings of methylated DNA at the exact same location in both the parents and the children that you didn't see in the rest of the population. So there was information stored there in that junk DNA that demonstrated there's something different in these two population groups that you didn't see everywhere else. Does that equal causation? No, it does not equal causation. And to her credit, she said, "Hey, listen, we realize that this is in that junk DNA. That's our current paradigm, and that somehow this may be affecting, cortisol levels or other things that we are already understand. But no, but she never went so far as to say maybe that's long-term memory. I will, and I can. I have the academic freedom to consider alternative explanations for things that we see, but we can't necessarily understand. Well, it's because we need a fresh perspective. And I would tell you that the possibility that long-term memory, emotional operating systems, all the rest of that stuff is stored in DNA is not crazy. It is an elegant explanation for the things that we see, but we can't explain given our current paradigm, our current understanding of things. Think about this for just a second, okay? Consider the life of the salmon. No, you guys have all heard about the salmon. He's this fish that is hatched way up high in the mountains and in the mountain streams. Last fall or last summer, that salmon's parents swam upstream. They dug holes in the gravel. They laid their eggs. Their buddies came along and fertilized them, and then those parent fish died. They committed their bodies back to the stream, and those fertilized eggs sat there in that stream bed all winter long. Stream bed froze over, and those eggs were still buried deep in that gravel. The next spring, what happened? Things thawed out. Those eggs hatched. These little baby fish start swimming around, and they start eating bugs and stuff, and they start moving downstream, and they grow and they eat more bugs, and they go down and get washed over the waterfalls, and they continue to grow and they continue to grow, and eventually they make their way out to the ocean. And out in the ocean, they start eating more than just bugs. They start eating other fish and all the rest of the stuff. They grow, they grow, they grow. A year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years down the road, depending on the species of the fish, something happens. Something goes off in that fish's head and says, "Oh, it's time to go home." So what does he do? Turns around, he swims all the way back to the very river where he was hatched, and he doesn't just swim up into the mouth of that river. He starts swimming upstream, and he starts jumping over the waterfalls, under the bears, around the fishermen, and over waterfall after waterfall after waterfall after waterfall, and makes his way all the way back, way up high into the mountains. And what does he do? That fish will dig holes in the gravel bed. They'll lay their eggs in them. Their buddies will come along and fertilize them, and that fish will go ahead and die and commit his body back to the river without having any contact with the generation of fish before him. He never met his folks. He will never meet his children. How did that fish know how to live this amazing life? There was only one point of contact between him and the generations of fish before him and the generations of fish afterwards, and it was in that egg. What's in the egg? It's nothing but DNA and a little bit of energy to get the whole thing started again. So this fish knows how to live this amazing life, and nobody taught him how to do it. And the only point of contact was in that egg. Folks, it is vividly obvious that there is a lot more information that's stored in that DNA if you just think about it a little differently than the way we've been taught to think. 97% of DNA is junk. Oh, for crying out loud. What a moronic idea. What a cult level idea if you can't see beyond it, my friends. So here's the point. If we have the ability to store information, if we store instincts in that DNA, if in my example of the researcher in Canada, and by the way, you can look up that study. It was published, I think, in July or August of 2015 in Biological Psychiatry, and the author of that study, the researcher, her name was Rachel Yehuda. Her last name is Yehuda. Wouldn't it be useful in that circumstance that she noted, if the generation that got rounded up by the Nazis and they saw their friends being killed and their families being killed, wouldn't it be useful if when they saw that information, and it would kind of get you excited emotionally, right? No, there would be fear and anger and anxiety and hatred, but a lot of fear attached to that information. So when we take information and attach emotion to it, it actually gets driven into our long-term memory. We know this, okay? Wouldn't it be useful if they could take that information, attach emotion to it, the information that said guys that are dressed in brown shirts and these little swastika things and these tall black boots, and keeping German shepherds on short leashes. When you saw these people, you should be afraid. Wouldn't it be useful if you could pass that generation that information along to the next generation, even if you didn't live long enough to teach them these things? If they, the next generation, at an emotional level, saw these things and said, "Oh my gosh, I don't know why, but I'm afraid. We need to fight, hide, run away, or scream for help." Wouldn't that be a useful survival mechanism if the next generation had that emotional response based on the information that the first generation of people were exposed to? Wouldn't that be powerful? Wouldn't it be great if we could package that information up, put it in their DNA, and pass it on to the next generation? And in fact, that is exactly what I believe that we are seeing with Dr. Yehuda's research, and that is the fact that that our long-term memory is written in DNA, and we pass it on to the next generation as a survival mechanism. Think about that for just a second and think about how powerful that understanding is. Because if I'm right, and I absolutely believe I am because I've seen it over and over and over, and I can give you multiple examples of why this elegant explanation may very well go a long way to explaining what's going on. When we attach information to emotion, emotion is the energy that drives that information into our long-term memory. So it seems to me that number one, we're actually able to manipulate our own DNA. Number one. Number two, emotion is the key. Okay. So why don't we delve just a, and we talked about this a little bit in the last podcast. If you didn't listen to it, go back and listen to it, and listen to these wacko ideas that that actually are an elegant explanation of what's going on. But no, but how do we manipulate the emotion and use that tool to both connect and disconnect emotion from the information? And that's exactly what we see with energy techniques like Reiki and like EFT, emotional freedom technique tapping, or even meditation, guided meditations, visualizations, and so forth like that. When we use our imagination to tell our emotions, why don't we try this on and see what that feels like? This is how these energy psychology techniques that medicine has rejected for a long time. They can't do it anymore because they actually make a big difference. But no, what if what we're talking about here is exactly what's going on, and I believe it is. Long-term memory is stored in DNA. Emotional program are stored in DNA. Instincts written in DNA, and that's how we can pass them on from one generation to the next. So what I want to talk about really in this segment is the reasons why energy psychology techniques like Reiki and EFT and guided meditations and so forth, why they work. The reason that they work, the reason that they are able to draw some of the energy out of a traumatic memory for somebody, is that now that we understand that it takes energy attached to, or emotional energy attached to information to drive it into DNA. What if we just detach the emotion from the information and take the energy away from that memory, so that we take the power away from the memory? There's it's one thing to see a car wreck It's another thing to see your wife or your children involved in that car wreck. The experiences are dramatically different. To see a car wreck, yes, that's no, that's a shocking deal. To know that your no, to know that your family is in that car wreck is a completely different experience. And so, if we use that example, and I'm sorry if that's just morbid and horrible. It is. It's a, but it's a no, but it's a prime example of why we can have a different experience of the information, seeing a car wreck happen versus seeing a car wreck happen with our family involved. But no, it also begs some understanding of what emotional energy is, what the character is, what the characteristics of it is, and then we can more effectively use it to manipulate that information and use that energy appropriately to get the sort of results that we want to help us unlock a life we love. Boom! This is that's the long way around to getting back to accomplishing our primary objective, and that's teach you how to unlock a life you love. Pay attention. This is the core concept that we teach here at Doc of Unlock, and that is understanding the very nature of emotion. Emotion is unbelievably powerful. It determines everything about how we experience our life because every decision that we make, everything that we do, we're running it through an emotional filter. We are emotional beings. Everybody in the sales business understands this. Everybody in medicine kind of sort of gets it, but no, we don't like dealing with emotions because they're all so messy and sticky and yeah, if we can't throw a pill at it, we don't like it. If we can't control it, we don't like it. If we don't understand it, we don't like it. So let me teach you what I have learned over the past 10 years of spending tens of thousands of hours and dollars on personal development, trying to understand the human condition. And it's very much this: you have to understand the very nature of positive and negative emotions. Every emotion that we feel, we can put into one of two categories. It's either positive or negative emotion. It can vary on the amount of energy that it has. If you want to understand this graphically, I'm kind of a graphic guy, but no, but if you took out a piece of paper and you drew a graph out on it. Go on the left hand side of that piece of paper and draw a vertical line, draw a horizontal line across the bottom of that piece of paper, and that's your x and y axis. If you go right in the middle of the horizontal axis and draw another vertical line, that's the center point of our graph. And if you think about this, everything on the right hand side of that graph is positive emotions. Okay. And everything on the left side of that graph is negative emotions. At the top of the graph is high energy. At the bottom of the graph is low energy. So if you want to grab a piece of paper and draw that out, or just follow along and think about this for just a second. If we were to say, let's go explore the bottom left hand side of that graph. The bottom left hand side of that graph, we could put low energy, very negative emotions. So write despair down in the bottom left hand corner. And then we'll go to the top left-hand corner. So very negative, very high energy emotion. Put rage up there. Okay. Now let's go to the other side of the equation. Let's go to the positive side, but very low energy all the way to the right-hand side of that graph, and write serenity. Okay. Peace. So we have a very low energy emotion there, but it's very, very positive. Peace and serenity qualifies. Now go to the very top right hand side of that graph. Very high energy, very positive emotion. Can you think of a more high energy, very positive emotion than say like ecstasy, right? Or just life couldn't get any better. So which side of this whole thing do you think you want to live on? Does anybody out there want to live on the left hand side of this graph? No, nobody wants to feel negative emotions. We've talked about this, okay? Everybody wants to feel positive emotions. So if nobody wants to feel negative emotions, but everybody feels negative emotions, why are we experiencing negative emotions? Why? Why would what purpose do they serve? Well, let me answer that question with a question. What is the first thing that a baby does when they're born? What do? They cry, right? Well, what is that cry? What is that child trying to get across to you? What are they trying to communicate? Is he happy about being here? No, he's ticked. Okay. Just a few minutes ago, he was floating around in his mom's belly. He could hear her heartbeat. He could hear her breathing. He could hear her talking, farting, even. And now, just a few seconds later, somebody squeezed the crap out of his head, and somebody's shining a bright light in his eyes that he's completely unfamiliar with. It is cold. He can't hear his mama farting anymore, and everybody's wearing a mask, passing him back and forth from one person to another. What do you think that kid is experiencing? Is he not afraid? Yes, of course he is. What's his response? Ah, right? Ah, help me, help me. So what do? We dry him off, give him back to mom. What does he do? Oh, he stops crying. There's mom. Hi, mom. I'm good. Who taught that baby how to cry? Who taught the baby how to cry? Nobody. Nobody taught the baby how to cry. It's almost like he was born with a program and knows how to do it using emotion. And not only is he using emotion, he's using negative emotion, right? There's nothing positive about crying, although the fact that we're happy that he cries, because if he doesn't cry, he dies, right? So it's a good thing that he cries, but it's negative emotion. So what's the character of negative emotion? The character of negative emotion is that it's energy moving away from us. It is chaotic. It is destructive emotional energy. These are the characteristics of emotional energy. And so negative emotion is emotional energy that's moving away from us, destructive, chaotic, and dispersive. Okay. Useful in a fight, or if you need to hide, run away, or scream for help, just like that baby did. Just like he responded to his emotional program. And he used emotion, our primary language of human beings. Laughing, crying, all the rest of that stuff is the same in every language, regardless of what language you speak. If someone's laughing, someone's crying, someone is sad, they're excited, they're happy, we can tell. We don't have to speak their language, because we already speak their language, the language of emotion. And we can classify every single emotion as positive or negative. So if we understand that negative emotions are dispersive, chaotic, destructive energy that we use as human beings to fight, hide, run away, or scream for help, that makes them primitive, survival level emotions. Okay. And really useful too, because they've served humanity well for millennia. We know that because here we are. We've survived. Okay. But it's time for us to evolve. It's time for us to consciously choose to use and harness the power of positive emotions. So let's understand the characteristics of positive emotions. Okay. You know where do you know how to define it? If negative emotions are dispersive, chaotic, and destructive energy, then what do you think positive emotions are? Well, what's the opposite of dispersive? It's concentrated. That's emotional energy that's moving toward us. It's moving toward the center of who we are. So it's concentrated. It is creative emotional energy, and it is concentrated. Think about that for a second. If you understand this concept of understanding the difference between negative emotional in energy, which is dispersive, chaotic, and destructive, and positive emotional, which is concentrated, creative energy, it'll change your life. Why would anybody use negative emotional energy, which is primitive survival level emotional responses, and not use concentrated, creative emotional energy in your life? It's because we don't understand. And the higher, better part of us lives in positive emotional energy. Unbelievable. Understand this concept, change your life immediately. And understand that that our automatic responses to most of the ugly things in our life is because we're operating off of a negative emotional program that is survival level thinking. Do you realize that makes us cavemen walking around in tennis shoes? Well, here's the good news. We don't have to live off of that program anymore, guys. We can consciously choose to use another program. We can consciously choose to use positive emotional energy, but we have to wake up and we have to understand what it is that's going on. And that, my friends, is exactly why these energy techniques are so incredibly effective, is because they address us as emotional beings, and they address us as energetic beings, because every every word that we use implies emotion. Behind that emotion is emotional energy. Now that you understand the character of that emotional energy, you understand that behind that emotional energy is you. And emotional freedom technique, tapping, Reiki, guided meditations, all the rest of these energy techniques are addressing you as you really are and as you're affecting the physical part of your body. This is what we're all about here, folks, is teaching people the information that lives in the gap between the world that we can weigh and measure, the physical world that we can weigh and measure, and the non-physical world of thoughts, feelings, and emotions that take up no space, that do not have any weight, but are very, very real. Your emotions is your very spirit moving around from place to place, experiencing the world, saying, "What's it like when I do this?" And you have an emotional program that you were born with. You inherited it from your folks, and now you know where it came from. Hey, it's written in your DNA. Okay. So if you're walking around experiencing the world in a negative way and you don't like what it is, it's okay. It may not even be your fault. In fact, it's never your fault because your emotional program you inherited from your folks. And the other part of that emotional program we wrote before the age of 7 years old, when we were experiencing the world, and everything that you experience before the age of 7 years old goes into a file, goes into a filter, if you will, that says this is survivable. Okay, we've all been around people that that have been abused their whole lives. No, I love to give the example of the abused woman, the abused spouse. We've all seen a woman who is in an abusive relationship and she doesn't like it. She gets out of that relationship. She gets into another. What's it going to look like? Same thing. She's going to get beat up. She gets out of that one. She gets into another relationship. What's it going to look like? She gets beat up. And this cycle just continues on, and nobody can understand why this happens. The reason it happens is that sometime before the age of 5, 6, 7 years old, she experienced abuse and survived it. She's making decisions that she's running through that emotional filter that was written as a child. And everything that she experienced as a child that she survived, it goes into the survivability filter. And every dude that she comes across, even if she knows unconsciously, somewhere deep down inside, that this guy's going to beat me up, there's a part of her that says, you can survive that. And nothing ever changes in her life until he does one thing. She wakes up. She gets a wake up call. She either wakes up with her bloody face in a ditch, or she wakes up in the hospital, or somebody beats her children, or she simply comes to the it comes to the conclusion, yeah, something's got to change here, and nothing will change until she makes that change. And she applies a different emotional program in her life, and then things change. Folks, we live in a golden era of human development. I will tell you what happened in 2012. Everybody thought the world was going to end when the Mayan calendar ended in 2012. The world did not end. What ended was an era of not understanding, of giving our power away. And now We're 12 years into this new era where we are understanding how these bodies that we live in work, how this universe functions, getting a glimpse, a piece here and there, and we experiment with it. And when we find that things move forward, it's almost like a light bulb comes on, and you can see the next step and the next step and the next step after that on the pathway. And that's exactly what I have found in my transition from Western medicine into this weird world of energy, psychology, um, food, all the rest of this stuff. We're learning that there has been a tremendous amount of information that was withheld in the last world. Okay, and it was withheld for the benefit of a handful of people. That that dynamic is dead. And we're now moving into this new era where information, once it's an understanding, once it is unleashed on the world, you can't put that genie back into the bottle, guys. And I will tell you where the genie came out of the bottle for me. Number one, the food we eat is a big deal. It affects our bodies at an immunologic level, and it affects every single one of us differently because we're not machines. We are more like snowflakes. They look the same from 10 feet back, but when you look at them, there's incredible heterogeneity. They're not alike. We are not machines, and the food that we eat affects every single one of us differently. I found that in my practice. That was the first step for me. And the second thing is that the thoughts we think, the emotions that we feel, and this is the most powerful part, which is why we spend so much time talking about it here. The emotions that we feel affect our bodies, our physical bodies, dramatically. And I'm not the only guy talking about this, but I am the guy who's talking about the fact that it affects our DNA. And folks, this is the point. This is the juncture. This is the hitch. This is the information that lives in the gap is your own friggin' DNA. And your DNA is responsive to your emotions. That genie's out of the bottle, kids. But now that it's out of the bottle, guess what we get to do? We get to play with it. And you can play with it right here. You can experience what it is to change the emotional program that you're applying to your life. And the very first place I would tell you to do that, join our EFT program. Come sit here and tap with Ashley and see the shift that is possible unbelievably fast, unbelievably fast. And then once you start playing with a genie that's now out of the bottle, you figure out, oh, this dude can fly. Yeah, this dude can fly, and so can you. My friends, we are such unbelievably powerful pieces of equipment. You are created in the image of our Creator. It is time for us all to step into the true power of who we are. Understand who we are. Understand how to manipulate the world that you live in. Understand how to manipulate that body that you live in, that mind that you live in, the emotions that you're experiencing. Understand it's not your dadgum fault if you're experiencing life in a way that you don't want to experience it because you get to change the program, but you have to wake up. I'm here to help you wake up to the fact that we are unbelievably powerful, and I will show you how to do this. Join that EFT program. Go get in there and tap with Ashley. It'll blow your mind. Listen to the other programs that we have. We're gonna next week we're gonna bring a guy on here who is a cancer survivor. Blow your mind. His name is John Bygraves. Can't wait to get you in front of him. Listen, I told everybody I'd keep these programs short. We're running over 30 minutes here. So I'm gonna shut this off. Invite you to come back next week. Listen to John Bygraves. He's got a story that will blow your mind. So do I. So I'm just tickled to death to say thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here. My name's Dr. Tim Teel. I am the Doc of Unlock. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us here at the Unlock a Life You Love podcast. We'll see you next time. Love you guys. See you later.